Hey, welcome to the Black Knight Nation podcast. I'm your host, Sal Internado. The Black Knight Nation podcast is brought to you by Higher Echelon. Higher Echelon is a company run by Joe Ross, who's a former Army fullback, former Army assistant coach, former Army former Army officer, and a guest on the Black Knight Nation podcast. Check out our Black Knight Nation channel on YouTube. We're getting close to 600 subscribers. We really appreciate everybody that's watched our coverage. Had a lot of videos I posted on the Army Navy game that are up there now. Plenty of our it's been a week, Brendan. It's been a week since the Army Navy game, but I was still posting stuff as of like Thursday and Friday of this week. It's crazy. So there's a lot of stuff up there from the alma mater to the defensive stand, the goal line stand. I was in the back of the end zone. I shot that. That's on there. Press conferences, everything. So check that out. We have, we were going to come on here and talk a little bit about, Andre Carter and the situation that's going on with the policy and the government stuff. But we got some news today, later this afternoon, early evening, that Army's going to make some coaching changes on its staff, and these are kind of things that we've talked about during the season a little bit. But Brent Davis is out as offensive coordinator at Army after 9 years, and Brent's been with Jeff Monken on his previous stop at Georgia Southern. He's coached the triple option flex bone offense. He's a guru in with the scheme, and I wanted to just get out there first. John Griffin saying congratulations to me for breaking the news, the big bites for me, Sal. I didn't break the news. The news was out earlier. I kind of followed up on it a little bit and tried to get some insight. I have some insight that I could provide here on who might be the next um, offensive coordinator and who might not be the next offensive coordinator. So we'll talk about that. First off, Brendan, let's get your take on when you first heard the news, what your thoughts were.
So this is something I've been wanting for uh, at least a couple of years now, and it's really like, and it's really it's not personal, you know. I think a lot of times with coaches, sometimes things just run their course, and when you look back on kind of the history of this era in Army football, Brent Davis will go down as a major player in uh, the reason that the program came up the way it did. But uh,
Yeah.
he the last 3-4 years, I'd say he's become a guy who's had kind of fewer and fewer answers. And there are certainly kind of other factors to that. There's been a lot of rule changes, in particular the past three
Right.
years that the offensive has had to adjust to. But Um, ultimately, they've just been there. There's been way too many halves in recent years, particularly in Service Academy games, where the Black Knights have been shut out. And when the margins are that thin, you gotta find a way to squeeze a little more out. And I think maybe like another good way to look at it, and this is something I've talked about. Online and on Twitter and stuff. But I don't believe in the idea of like, a coach gets one game to save his job. I think you either believe that they could continue to do the job, or they can't. And so just hypothetically, if Army had lost to Navy this season, we what we would have been talking about for the past week is like, oh my gosh, like what a disaster this season was. They didn't accomplish any one of their goals. And and ultimately the offense would have been kind of the biggest reason for that. The defense started out this season kind of in a lot of trouble, but they really grew as the season went on and became a huge asset to the team, especially against Navy. But the offense just, especially against kind of opponents around Army's weight class, or above, they really struggled. And so I think this is a good a time as any to make a change. And I know some people are a little scared. They're like, be careful what you wish for. But I would point to the fact that after um, what was it, after 2018, and then we had the 2019 season, and then after 2019, it's like, okay, well, that didn't work out on defense, so let's bring in another coordinator. As long as uh, with the program, you're constantly asking the question, are we doing everything we can to be the best that we can be? And I would say that uh, you know obviously they've made a change, and I'm kind of looking forward to see who ends up in that role. If it's somebody on staff already, there's certainly one name I'd be very satisfied with. If it's an outside hire, that could work too. It's worked out with the defense. So
You hit it on the head a little bit. With I think one of the reasons for this change is the Service Academy games, right? So Army's
hmm
offense in the last 4 games against Navy has scored 4 offensive touchdowns, and one was in overtime last week. Last week, right? And
yeah,
in the last 4 games against Air Force, they've scored 51 points, 51 total points, and one of those games they scored 21 points. So that's 31 points in the 3 other games. So it's just like you say, maybe it's just and you look at the last Army Navy game that just happened last week, and you look at the changes of going to the pistol a little bit, right, and trying to mix things up. And you know, during my coverage of Army through the years, you always heard, okay, they're going to add a little bit of stuff, not necessarily wrinkles, but just maybe some more gun stuff because it seemed like they had quarterbacks like a Christian Anderson who can handle a little bit more gun, or even a Jabari Laws that could handle a little bit more gun stuff. But to be honest, right, these guys who they're recruiting out of college, they're not really a lot of recruiting out of high school. I'm sorry, are not really guys that are under center guys a lot, right? They're more of spread guys sometimes who are taking a lot of snaps from the shotgun position in high school. So maybe you'll see a little bit more of that. I just wanted to talk about a little bit more. I started to get into this a little bit in my story. And first off, we'll go to AJ Fitzpatrick saying Brent Davis did a great job building the Army team. And Monken, I really think ever since the Air Force game that put him on the hot seat, a lot of play calling was questionable ever since that. Thanks, AJ, for your comments. Really appreciate that. If you're watching right now, if you have any other comments, we'll read them out. I want to say something about Brent Davis, the person. I did an interview with him on the week of the Army Navy game. At the end of the interview, I asked him about what the senior class meant to him, and I mean, I almost thought there were tears there. He really cares about these players, right? He really cares about not just the offensive linemen, the offensive players, all of the offensive players. He's had them over to his houses for dinner, him and his wife. He talked about that a little bit, and he talked about how this senior class, they're going to leave their mark beyond this year with the younger players. He really felt like this was a team that they battled through some adversity this year. 6-6, yeah, it wasn't where they want to be, but he thought the guys that were leaving, like the Tylers, like the Cole Catterbones and Connor Bishops. I can go on and on about the senior guys. The Maurice Ballons, the Brahim Murphys, that they were going to leave a mark on the guys that they were going to leave the program um, better off in the next couple of years. And talking about that was built at Army early, right, with the mob, the offensive line's nickname, and that culture, and it seemed like that really was a big part of their change, just changing the feel around the team too. A lot had to do with the mob, and a lot had to do. I think it was Matt Hugenberg who might have nicknamed him the mob back when. But that was a big part of the culture at Army and the culture change. Guys like Bryce Holland, guys like Brett Totes, guys like Peyton Reeder, JB Hunter. We can go down, up and down. Guys like a Josh Boylan, who was a little bit undersized at first, but earned the right to start on the offensive line. And his senior year was one of the best offensive players. The offensive line was a big reason why they were successful. And Brent Davis coached the offensive line for 9 years. With the rise of Army football, Brendan from 16 to 18, when they're all those wins, give Brent Davis a lot of credit and the offensive line credit for that. And of course, the skill position players too, but played a pretty big role. I just want to just mention that because I think that it's important to know what was accomplished as much as some of the things that and I'm at me. I'm the offensive critic on this podcast, right? I'm going to examine every play and say, oh, you could have done this better, could have done that better. Never coached a down in my life, right? And I'm gonna like critique it. I think I've seen enough football, especially at Army. But you got to give a lot of credit to where they came from, and you wish maybe there was a little bit more evolution to this offense, maybe a little bit more creativity at times. But I mean, now we'll see what happens.
Yeah, and this is something I've said before on the podcast, but it bears repeating. To me, this was always more than just play calling. Play calling is certainly a part of it, but for me, it was kind of like the larger idea of just more so talent evaluation. I think, especially this year again, like eh, if if they had lost to Navy, we just like we would be talking about the season and just be saying like, my God, like they had three firsty quarterbacks and just like could never seem to find anything with them. Like what's happening? Um, you know, so. But yeah, I mean, absolutely. Especially 16, 17, 18. A lot of those successful fourth down calls that the program has become known for, absolutely due to the strength of the offensive line, kind of more so than necessarily the skill players behind them.
Yeah, I think that this year there were battled injuries on the offensive line, guys kind of in and out. I mean, the guys that like Connor Bishop and Connor Finucane started every game. Jackson Phillipowitz started, I think, 11 out of the 12 games. And then the tackles were kind of rotating. You had Finucane at tackle at times. You had a little bit of a rotation there at tackle. So I mean, and the fullbacks were a little bit banged up, but I mean, there's you look at the one play in overtime where Markel Johnson scores against Navy, right? It's blocked perfectly. Josh Lingenfelter threw a great block there. The offensive line's really moving Navy off the ball, and the play was a success. They just couldn't get it done on a consistent basis in the Service Academy games, and yeah, you win some, you lose some in those games, but now it's going to be a little bit of a change. We'll see where it goes now. As far as who will be the next offensive coordinator, maybe we'll get. You mentioned it before. Who's the guy on staff that you would like to see maybe a chance to be offensive coordinator?
So I think if they go internally, I would be very comfortable with promoting Matt Drinkle to offensive coordinator. He's been a head coach before. Granted, it was at the NAIA level, but uh, I believe if I remember correctly, um, Munkin found him and because Drinkle was like giving a talk at some kind of like football coaches conference like
Yeah.
about his offensive philosophy. So yeah, I would be more than comfortable with that because again it's more than just play calling. It's talent evaluation and overall philosophy. So
Yeah, I would look at like I was talking to somebody today about who might be the next offensive coordinator, and you're thinking, okay, if they stay on staff, Drinkle is certainly a choice. Cody Worley, the quarterbacks coaches, could be a choice too. He was the offensive coordinator for the Liberty Bowl in 2020 because Brent Davis
yes,
couldn't make the
yes.
game. Um, yeah, so I mean, you look at that. I mean, maybe they could go co-offensive coordinator if they had to with both of those guys. Share the responsibility. You could certainly do that. I know one name. So here's the thing, right? Navy, right? With Navy going undergoing a coaching change, and they haven't named their coach yet. You have a feeling that Brian Newberry is going to be the coach. I mean, the Navy coaches are out there recruiting with kind of the same staff as Ken Niumatalolo. Yeah, they have to do that to try to keep the kids committed, especially with signing day coming up on the 21st, even though the signing of these certificates isn't binding, right? But still, you want to keep the classes together if you can. And, you know, maybe the name of Ivan Jasper comes up, right? Who was the Navy offensive coordinator before last season, and the AD wanted to remove Ivan Jasper. Ken Niumatalolo fought hard to keep his friend on staff, and I guess that Ken Niumatalolo calling the plays this year for Navy. So maybe Ivan Jasper, him and Jeff Monken, their ties go back to Hawaii when Jeff Monken was a grad assistant. But from what I heard, that's not going to happen. It's not going to be Ivan Jasper coming in and being the offensive coordinator. And a lot of Army fans are okay. Let's have Coach Ken come in and be the offensive coordinator and stick it to Navy, right? I don't see that happening either, to be honest with you. I think we're going to get a guy, maybe if we're going to get somebody new, it might be maybe an outside of the box kind of guy that might be under the radar. I heard a couple names, but I want to research those names before I throw them out there. But it's not going to be a guy that's going to come off the tip of your tongue and say, "Oh yeah, that guy." So I think it's kind of a wait and see approach here. And we also have to mention that also, Slotbacks coach Jason Nicholas will not be back this year. Might be back for 2023 either after 1 year. So they do have two openings on staff, I guess you could see. And there are guys out there, right? Well, there's a guy out there that we talked about before we went live on the podcast. First, let's get to this comment by Asa, dude. He said, any specific coaching names you think would fit the USMA bill? We just got to that. Sorry, I'm a little late on that comment. I apologize. Yeah. I was mentioning Trent Steelman out there. Trent Steelman is the offensive coordinator for Eastern Kentucky. He's been doing that for a couple of years. He's the former Army quarterback. And there was a time when Trent Steelman wanted to come back to West Point and coach. I'm not sure where that's at right now, but there are guys who have some connection to the academy or have some connection to Jeff Monken that are out there. Now, and please don't go out and say I think said Trent Steelman is a candidate to be the next Army offensive coordinator, right? I'm not saying that. I'm saying there are guys out there that could be on the that could may or may not be on the list or have the credentials to be considered for the position. We'll see what direction Jeff Monken goes. But Brendan, here's my thought real quick, and then we'll get into the other stuff with Andre Carter. My thought real quick, if you're doing this, right, and you're going away from a guy that's been your offensive coordinator for 9 years at West Point and was also your coordinator at Georgia Southern, you've had a long-standing relationship with Brent Davis. You probably have somebody in mind that you want to fill that position, right? You don't just get rid of a guy who you've had some success with. Granted, this year was a little bit rough, but you've had some success with in the past. You don't just say, "Okay, time for a change." You probably have. My thinking is Jeff Monken probably has somebody in mind for the position that probably me or you have might not even considered. So,
Yeah, I mean that's definitely a good point. I mean, ultimately, whoever gets hired to fill that role, I won't necessarily be surprised unless it is like Ken or Ivan Jasper, or even Brian Bohannon, who's the current head coach at Kennesaw State, who's a former Navy assistant. But I don't know why he wouldn't get an interview for the Navy head coaching job. But that's a great point. Like Monken and Davis go back a long time. So yeah, I can't imagine this would be just like an emotional like snap decision, and then we don't know who we're even going to look at. I certainly would hope, given more of the through line of stability at West Point, that they would have somebody in mind already, as opposed to what's currently going on at the Naval Academy.
Yeah, and there's we talked about Matt Drinkle. We talked about Cody Worley. Also, you have Mike Vitti also on staff. He doesn't have any prior coordinator experience, but if you think that Mike's going to move up the line, so to speak, on the Army coaching staff, maybe that's another guy you consider too. So I mean, there's options out there, and like I said, I'm hearing some names kind of outside the box, but I would like to check those names out before I mention them on the podcast. But we'll see what happens. I think that's about it for today's coaching news. I think we pretty much covered everything. You know what, too? To make this change right now, when like we said, signing day is the 21st, right? It's Wednesday. And to make this change now I want to also give Brent Davis his credit with recruiting. His territory's recruiting area is Georgia, right? And Army, you know how well Army's roster is made up of a lot of Georgia players, and a lot of Georgia players that Brent Davis has gone to their high schools, has gone to their homes and pitched Army football. And he should be definitely complimented for that. And he's been a good to great recruiter for Army, right? He's brought in some really solid players. I tried to mention him in the story. I'm thinking of guys like Kel Walker. I'm thinking like guys like Tyrell Robinson, Ken Brinson. I'm thinking of Peyton Reeder. Brian England. These are guys from the state of Georgia, from the Peach State that Brent Davis has been involved in recruiting. So by moving away from Brent, you're losing a pretty good recruiter too. So somebody's going to have to step in there, whether it's a new offensive line coach, new slot backs coach. Maybe they maybe they change it up. Maybe a drink all Cody Worley goes to that territory, or we'll see what happens. But he had a pretty May had a good run as a recruiter too. Let's get to AJ Fitzpatrick saying, oh, well, we don't really go into that AJ too much, so I'm gonna pass on the comments there. Yeah. But he says, do you think Army will have new packages with an air raid passing game? Um, Brendan, you want? No,
I,
I don't think they will. You want
I
to
mean,
answer that?
they kind of did to start this season, and they ended up going 0-2. So I don't know. They could certainly stand to pass 10 times a game. You just like I don't know, like so I think part of the problem is or like part of what's been the problem, especially in terms of like evaluating quarterbacks, is like like you can only like everybody talks about the importance of practice and practice evaluations and stuff like that, but at the end of the day, it's like it's Army going up against Army. It's not, and there's only like there's only so much that throwing against the Army scout team can tell you as far as like somebody's passing ability. So I don't know. Like I said, they could stand to throw 10 times a game. I don't think that's a problem. I just wish they would stop throwing on 1st and 10.
Yeah, I don't think when you talk to Jeff Monken, what's his philosophy about winning football games? Running the football and stopping them. And I remember even going back to Rich Ellerson, who was the coach before Monken. You always say about how many things can go wrong when you drop back to pass, right? I mean, yeah, completion is one of the only positives that can happen when you get interception. Fumble, incompletion, so if you think of that way, and that's been the philosophy pretty much, that run the football to set up the pass. Play action passes have been really the key passes in this Army offense under Jeff Monken, right? Not necessarily, hey, we're behind, let's throw the ball all over the stadium. Not necessarily is what got it done. Asa dude said, agree with what you both were saying earlier about Monken having saw this coming and having a contingency plan in place. John Griffin said Army needs to be more successful recruiting quarterback like Ahmad Bradshaw. Um, John Griffin's also say Bryson Daly looks promising. Promising runner for sure. We got to see how Bryson can do in the passing game. We haven't really seen that in games, but he's looking pretty good running the football. Hope to see more of that in the spring. Asa dude feels like the next 2 seasons are an opportunity to take advantage of some Navy instability. We'll see. We'll see what direction Navy goes. If they keep Brian Newberry, then there's not some maybe the instability is maybe not as much as you think.
I mean, I've certainly sat through my fair share of beatdowns on the Army side in the Army Navy game. I would love to see at least one going the other way in my lifetime.
Yeah, it would be nice, right? And we'll see what happens in the future. Guys, if you want to keep your comments going, we'll certainly put your comments up there. We'll answer your any questions. But let's talk real quick before this happens today on Sunday with the coaching change news on staff. The big news this week was Andre Carter in the NFL, right, Brendan? I mean, you had yet you know what I found pretty timing is the week before the week of the Army Navy game. I think it was Friday. Military News came out with a story about a bill being passed, trying to be been sent through Congress, a bill where cadet athletes, service academy athletes, would have to again reverting back to before 2019 when it was changed by Donald Trump. Um, about service academy athletes having to wait and do their service time before they not going directly to the pros like they can right now. And I thought the timing of it was pretty I don't know, the timing of it, the Army Navy game, the day before the Army Navy game, right? Um just was odd to me, and I thought there was some agenda involved. And then it passes through apparently the Senate um this past week, and now and it's kind of like not at the forefront of this act. It's kind of toward the end of this act. So I don't know if it's not necessarily snuck in there, but it's not necessarily at the top of the act apparently. And
Yeah, it
just
was
some
an
agenda
amendment.
here, political.
Yeah, it was an amendment to the bill, so it was not something that was drawn up as originally as part of the bill.
Yeah, and I think that I'm sorry, you probably know more about that stuff than I do, but to me, there seems like definitely some agenda behind this, no doubt. I mean, if Andre Carter's not a high round pick, are they doing this right now? Are they considering changing it up again? And Ben Kotwika, I posted my thoughts on Twitter, and Ben Kotwika, former Army coach, former Army lineman. He was a coach at Army Prep. Steve Anderson, one of Steve Anderson's mentors, Steve Anderson, co-host on this podcast. He said it seems like they flip flop on this every 3 to 5 years, and that's because you get if the presidents change, you have different quote unquote philosophies. But I'm not too sure this is coming from the Biden side. I'm thinking that this is coming from one one politician in Wisconsin who was a former Marine who believes
Yeah,
that, a service academy grads should all be war fighters in his mind. They shouldn't be doctors. They shouldn't be, they should all be war fighters in his mind. So I don't know. To me, I think and you know what I think the funny thing is he backtracks a little bit, right? And he says he's going to do everything he can now to try to grandfather the athletes that were under this previous going directly to the pros, right? Going directly to the pros. You're telling me that he had no idea who Andre Carter is before he tried to write this, you know?
yeah, yeah.
I mean,
Uh,
you tell me he had no idea the situation. He had no idea who Andre Carter was and how this might affect one person in this draft. I mean, maybe Air Force has a guy who maybe they have an offensive lineman that gets drafted this year. I don't know, right? But two people at the most that this is going to affect, and he had no idea. I don't know. It seems like it's just very unfair to a guy like Andre Carter. I mean, did Andre Carter have to stay at West Point? No, he could have went to the transfer portal. He could have went to a school where he probably could have got a little bit more um been on TV a little bit more in front of more people, in front of more eyes, but he decided to stay. And he decided to stay because told once he graduates West Point, he has a chance to go directly to the NFL. And Andre Carter is like a guy who is going to forget about West Point. Like you look at guys like a Brett Toast, for instance, who's on the Eagles. Look at guys like Cole Christensen, Elijah Riley, and John Radigan. Those guys are promoting the Army while they're in the NFL. They're not just working out. They're not just going to team meetings in the off season. They're promoting the Army. I think I've always thought in my mind, and I dealt with this with Caleb Campbell in 2008. I was the beat writer when Caleb Campbell on the first day of training camp was yanked out of training camp on that
yeah,
day and
Yeah.
told you got to go back to the Army, and grandstanding agenda, using these athletes as now. Am I wrong to say, Brendan, that these guys are being used as pawns here, or am I not? I don't. Is pawns the right word in your mind? You tell me.
No, no, I think you're right. You know, and there's multiple frustrating aspects to this. First of all, the fact that the fact that they can't get any traction on a single policy for more than a few years, because it is a political tool to be had, and what it like whenever like anytime there's a dangling switch or a lever out there for somebody to pull to make something happen, to get some attention or whatever, they're gonna do it. The timing of it is very frustrating, and ultimately the most frustrating thing to me, especially in the context of the here and now, is like all of the services are way behind on their recruiting goals. Like there was a big story about that this year, and you're telling me that forget the fact that there's already dozens of other exceptions where people don't necessarily go straight into their service commitment, whether it be Rhodes Scholars, world class athlete program, what have you. There's tons of existing exceptions beyond just playing in the NFL. But like, is Andre Carter going to do more for the Army PR wise, recruiting wise? Going to the NFL, getting becoming maybe a first round pick, hopefully like playing at a high level somewhere, or as somebody so eloquently said on Twitter, and I'll clean it up a little bit, shoveling dung in Fort Benning. You're like, which of these things is going to bring more positive eyeballs to the Army? It's just like it boggles the mind.
You know what? I think you make a good point, and I wish we had Steve on, because Steve could definitely put it in perspective here. This is way out of my league, but I was going to a Kelvin Hopkins tweet, former Army quarterback, that I wanted to say on read on this podcast, and he said, "Believe me when I say the Army is not starving for lieutenants. Someone's third shot will be okay without Andre Carter." And maybe that's what you're saying. Maybe there's not enough. Maybe there's too many second lieutenants right now, and not enough soldiers for those second lieutenants to lead maybe right now. Maybe I'm wrong. But good point by Kelvin Hopkins there, and even the guys who are serving now are behind Andre Carter here. The former Army players, and yeah, maybe he was their teammate and stuff, but they're out there right now in the Army and they are serving, and they say a lot of these former guys, some of them are out. Guys who played 20 years ago are saying, "Hey, we've been there. We've been through our service time." And I think if you polled everybody, maybe but the politicians, you might say, "Hey, it's a bit more of a benefit for him to be out in the NFL promoting." And every time when he's mentioned, "Hey, he was an All-American at Army. He was the first All-American at Army since Mike Mayweather in 1990." Showing that you can do both. You can be a
Yeah.
successful. You can graduate from the academy, and you can have success in in the athletic field.
It's
So
it's it's literally, I mean, the thing that's different about an Army player going to the NFL as opposed to all of these like other exceptions that do happen and still happen, it's free advertising on what remains the biggest television show in America. Like
yeah,
you couldn't, like, I mean, like, you can buy it, but it'd be very expensive. Meanwhile, like, hypothetically next year, if Carter's on a team somewhere, you every week, every single week on national television, somebody's saying, "Hey, this kid went to Army. This kid went to Army. This kid went to West Point.
yeah.
This kid's eventually going to be fulfilling his service, but not right now." And it's just like, I don't know.
I
So
really hope that
so
this.
frustrating.
I really. I'm sorry, Brendan.
No, go
I'm
ahead.
so.
Go ahead.
I hope. I hope that this doesn't hurt his draft stock because at the before the season started, guys like Mel Kiper were having him a top 15 pick, and yeah, he was a little banged up this year, and he didn't put up the stats that he did last year. There's a lot of reasons why, playing through some injuries, getting double, triple team. Teams paying a little bit more attention to Andre than they did last year, at the beginning of the year. And so, but there were 8 teams at Army Navy in the press box there to see 8 NFL teams there to see Andre Carter. And I did have a chance to talk to one of the scouts from a team, for a little bit, and I was asked some questions about Andre Carter. I was asked about his character, and I was asked about what type of kid he is. And I've never heard anybody say one bad word about Andre Carter. His work ethic is out of this world. His play, when he's healthy, is next level. And I hope that this doesn't affect his draft stock by you know um, a representative from Wisconsin coming up with this, amendment to a bill to, try to take away what Andre Carter that was a given to him, that he was going to be able to play his 4 years, graduate from West Point, and get his chance at the NFL. That's all he's asking for, is a chance. And I'll tell you, Ryan McCarthy, we had on this podcast about a year ago, former Secretary of the Army, and he's a guy who signed off on Elijah Riley. He's a guy who signed off on Cole Christensen. And he still says that, and he was quoted in the Pete Thamel story on ESPN that came out a few days back. And he was saying he still thinks that the best like we're saying, the best thing for a good thing for this Army is to have these guys out there to promote the Army and get the word out on the Army. And also, he said that Connor Slumka had a chance with the Jaguars. He had a rookie tryout chance. It didn't work out for him. He graduated Ranger School and is serving right now. And he's saying he was in the same class as Elijah Riley and Cole Christensen. They all came out at that time, and it didn't work out for Connor in the NFL, and he's serving. So I mean, it's not like these guys are trying to dodge their service time. It's not like they're trying to, if it doesn't work out, if there's a couple guys on the Army's team that have their pro day, and scouts want to give him a chance at rookie minicamp, like it happened last year with Eric Smith, Nolan Cockrell, Malcolm Morrison, guys like that, Seth Cunningham, doesn't work out, then they're going to have to, if they're physically able to do it, they're going to have to start their clock starts on their 5 years of military service. I mean, it's not like these guys are looking to dodge; they're looking for a chance to play professionally. If it doesn't work out, they go back and do their military time. That's the way I look at it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's I don't know, the whole thing is frustrating all around, and I think what really makes it painful is I don't think this amendment or any of this guy's logic is being proposed in good faith. I
Yeah.
think I think he just like has an axe to grind or something. So
Yeah, I mean, and we commend him for his service time. Mike Gallagher is his name, the rep from Wisconsin. And what gets me a little bit, and I'm really speaking out of turn here. Before I speak out of turn, let's get to AJ Fitzpatrick's comment here. The whole entire thing sounds strange. Did he not know about the waiver? No other politician hasn't complained ever since 2019. What is the problem? Why is it a problem now? And this is what I want to touch on real quick, and maybe we'll be done with this. It seems like now that it's picking up some steam on social media, and people are getting behind, you know, Andre Carter's position and wanting him to get that chance that he was, quote, promised, so to speak. Now there's politicians coming back, on Andre Carter's side. Where were they? Where were these guys when this bill's passing through? Now I don't know how politics works, Brendan. I know it had to pass through the Senate, and there's one politician from New York State has come out and said, absolutely, he should be able to play in the NFL.
yeah, I
Well, I
saw
don't know
that.
if this ever went. I don't know if does this bill does it go through? Did it go through your desk? I don't know if it did. If it did, you're a little late to the party right now. And I don't know if one politician stand would stop it. No, they vote for it, right? So I don't know if these politicians that are coming out right now in support of Andre Carter did say something when this bill was passing through. But now it's like, okay, and now Gallagher's backtracking, right? And now he's going to find a way. His his was man, I have head scratcher on his quote, man. Actually, I do have some information on the offensive coordinator that I think we're going to be happy with. I don't know if I should reveal. I don't know if I should reveal it on the podcast, Brendan. I have some information on possibly the next offensive coordinator, but first let me first let me get to this quote real quick. Don't mind. Sorry, I'm taking a couple minutes here. It was by the politician here. By Mike Gallagher. He told Pete Thamel 2 days ago, I will be working with my colleagues to identify a legislative fix that addresses this issue by grandfathering in existing athletes into the current system. Can you explain what does that mean? And like, what exactly does that mean, Brendan? I mean, does that mean he's gonna that's good means he's Andre Carter is going to be grandfathered, right? I mean, is that what that means?
I, 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 you know, by all of my logic, I assume that is what that would mean. Um,
It's
yeah,
confusing. The way
I guess,
sometimes things are written.
yeah. I guess I guess uh, whoever was like at the academy at the time, um, or at or I guess, well, technically at any of the academies, I guess is what we're really talking about. Um, you know, when the policy was in place, you know, if that's what they were told in 2019, I guess like then they would be grandfathered in by what they were told in 2019, as opposed to whatever the rule is going forward. But
So
I
it
don't
would
know,
start
man.
with the is it going to start at this freshman class at the academies now? With not just, and we're not talking about just football here, It's the non-world class athlete programs, right? That this would probably football, of course, is gets the big headlines, but I mean, does it start with this year's freshmen coming in? This new amendment to the bill. Who knows? I wanted to
Yeah,
read Pat Ryan. I want to read Pat Ryan's comments here out of Ulster County. He's a West Point grad, and he's representing New York in Congress. And he said Andre Carter II should be eligible for the NFL draft. Period. Full stop. When he committed to West Point, the rules were clear. If you're in a spot in the NFL, you can delay your service and take it. We must honor this commitment. Now that's coming from the New York politician Pat Ryan, who, like I said, I wish that kind of stuff would have came out a little earlier. I wish that, you know, but we'll see. I guess I'm gonna give a tease here. I'm not gonna completely reveal, but I seem like I got a little tip on Army's next offensive coordinator, and from the tip I got, it will be a guy who's currently on staff. So that's what I got. I want to follow up on it. I want to follow up on a few things before I put it out there, but it looks like it'll be a guy currently on staff, and we'll, we'll see. We'll see. Hopefully I'll have that within the next 24 hours, and I'll put it up on the website. And guys, please at black9nation.com. That's where the story on Brent Davis being let go as offensive coordinators up there right now. Follow our Instagram accounts, our YouTube channel. We're all over the place. Subscribe to this podcast. It really helps us out getting our podcast out there. We're getting some good numbers on our podcast lately, and we really appreciate you guys following us. Brendan, we can't thank you enough for jumping on today. I mean, this is like, we're ready to talk just some NFL, get in and out of here, and then by the time we're done with the coaching news, we're like 45 minutes in. So thanks so much for your time.
you know,
Hopefully we'll
like
get
last 2 Sundays, we've had a lot of coaching news to talk about.
yeah, I mean, maybe we'll have some more. Maybe I'll have some more, like I said, soon. And we'll also want to get Steve Anderson's take on this, and we also want to get some other people. I'm gonna try to get Ryan McCarthy on this podcast to talk about, his thoughts on the benefit of the Service Academy athletes going directly to the pros. Working on some other guests too. So we hope that we can get you those guests. AJ Fitzpatrick, thank you so much for having me on the show. Sal, thank you. Open invitation anytime for Army fans. We love to have your comments and interaction. And John Griffin saying thank you guys, no problem. Yeah, so look out for possibly a story on Army's next offensive coordinator coming up soon. And we appreciate you joining us tonight. And Brendan, thanks a lot. And we'll be back soon with the next Black Knight Nation podcast.
Thanks, Sal. Merry Christmas.